Good morning, it's Friday the 14th of February. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast coming to you from ARIRANG's news centre in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Following a surprise proposal by Pyongyang, the two Koreas continue their high-level talks on this Friday. Seoul stresses both the inter-Korean family reunions and its military drills with Washington will take place as scheduled. Visiting U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry agrees with Seoul that the upcoming family reunions and the Seoul-Washington military drills should be dealt with separately. He also urges Seoul and Tokyo to work on improving their relations. Plus, President Park calls for government measures to reduce parents' spending on private tutoring, especially ones focused on English education. Now, diplomatic efforts to kickstart a new and more constructive era of inter-Korean relations have resumed as high-level officials from the two Koreas are meeting again on this Friday for the second time in just 3 days. North Korea is said to have proposed holding today's meeting. And for more, we cross live to our correspondent Hwang Sung-hee at Seoul's Unification Ministry. So, Sung-hee, we have a huge day ahead. I'm sure people on both sides of the border are hoping for some progress to be made today. What are we hearing at the moment?
Good morning, Mark. South Korean Chief Delegate Kim Kyou-hyun and his North Korean counterpart Won Dong-yon were scheduled to begin the talks at around 10 a.m. Korea time at the truce village of Panmunjom. So it should be getting started as we speak. Now, today's meeting comes upon North Korea's proposal, as you said. And after 14 hours of talks on Wednesday, the two sides walked away without reaching any tangible results. Again, the two sides do not have a fixed agenda on what will be discussed, but they will most likely pick up where they left off on Wednesday and try to narrow down their differences on the upcoming family reunions and the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. Mark?
Well, it certainly sounds like they have quite the difference to bridge, really, over those issues. So how likely is it that the two Koreas will reach an agreement at this point?
Well, North Korea demanded that South Korea postpone the upcoming military drills with Washington to sometime after the family reunions take place. The Koreas are scheduled to resume the family reunions from February 20th to the 25th, and this overlaps with the upcoming full legal exercises and the key resolve exercises at the end of this month. Now, South Korea refused to make changes to its plan, saying that humanitarian issues like the family reunions should not be linked to the military drills. South Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade said earlier this morning that the South will not let the military drills disrupt plans for the family reunions and vice versa. So the big question for today is whether the Koreas can reach a compromise. And Mark, we must remember North Korea has a history of breaking promises, just like we saw the regime walk away from its agreement to resume the reunions last September, just days before the event. Mark?
Yes, well, thank you, Sung-hee, and please do keep us updated on these talks there, and let's hope there is some progress to be made today. OK, that was our Hwang Sung-hee with the latest on today's rather hastily scheduled inter-Korean talks. Now, someone else who thinks North Korea shouldn't link the inter-Korean family reunions with Seoul and Washington's joint military drills is visiting U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Kerry, who arrived in Seoul on Thursday, has also urged South Korea and Japan to try and put history behind them. Kim Min-ji reports.
Topping the agenda at Thursday's talks between South Korea and the United States top diplomats was North Korea. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's visit to Seoul comes a day after North Korea demanded for a postponement of the upcoming joint military drills between Seoul and Washington to sometime after the two Koreas hold reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The visiting U.S. officials stressed Washington's shared stance with Seoul. The humanitarian issues and the military drills will be dealt with as two separate matters.
The family reunification is a matter of human rights. We would urge a complete separation of these two and no use of one as an excuse to somehow condition the other.
But Secretary Kerry was reluctant to comment on the friction between Seoul and Tokyo, which stemmed from Japan's ongoing denial of its wartime crimes in the early 1900s.
So while the United States obviously has a strong interest in the relationship and in the security component of the relationship, it's up to Japan and the Republic of Korea to put history behind them and move the relationship forward.
In response, Minister Yoon made clear South Korea's position that Japan's denial of history is harming their bilateral ties, adding the issue is no longer just a regional one.
The international community has expressed concern on a range of issues, like Japan's past aggression and its forced sexual slavery of women. Japanese politicians must listen closely to such concerns and take proper and sincere measures in order to improve ties with Korea.
Secretary Kerry will leave for China on Friday, a country that he called has the greatest potential to influence North Korea than any other nations in the world. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, North Korea appears to have accelerated excavation of its nuclear bomb testing site in the northeast of the country, but a test isn't believed to be imminent. Referring to its new satellite images, the US-Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University says North Korea likely started work last May on a new tunnel at its Punggye-ri site, where it has conducted its 3 previous nuclear tests, the most recent being in February 2013. The Institute estimates the pile of earth excavated from the tunnel has doubled over the last few weeks. The Institute adds it's unlikely Pyongyang intends to use this tunnel for its next nuclear test, since 2 other tunnels at the site appear to be complete. Now, the push to better promote the Korean name of the body of water that separates Korea and Japan is spreading. Following up on the success seen in the U.S. state of Virginia, New York is considering similar legislation, and one of the people behind this grassroots movement in Washington sat down with our Kim Han-ul to explain how it all began.
54-year-old Peter Kim witnessed a moment that will go down in the history of Korean Americans. It all started 2 years ago with a conversation he had with his son, who was in 5th grade at the time.
I asked my son, Chris, do you know the sea between Korea and Japan? Yes, Daddy. What's the name of it? Sea of Japan. So I really got upset. And I told him that it's not true. It's EC, and you call it Dongye. And he said, Daddy, it's in the textbook. That's how I learned in schools.
That's when Peter decided to take action. He went on to form a group which later spearheaded a grassroots movement of Korean Americans in the D.C. metro area.
I mean, there were a lot of people coming from Washington area, driving 2 hours to Richmond. They had to get up 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a cold weather here. Sometimes it was snowing, but still, senior citizen people, they just, wanted to go and show up at the General Assembly and pressure the Democratic, the delegates and senators to vote for EC bill.
However, the long and arduous journey was far from easy.
The most difficult one was the House Education Subcommittee, 9 members. Governor McAuliffe's staff actually went to them to stop the bill, and they actually did, and it was a 4-4 tie. They had to vote again and barely passed in 5-4.
Although last week's victory in Virginia means the same law will be applied to 7 other states in the southeastern U.S., Peter Kim says his hopes do not stop there.
So the journey in Virginia has come to an end, but do you think this journey should stop or continue elsewhere?
I think it should continue. I did my part, and other Korean Americans should step up and stick together and continue this movement until 2017, where IHO meets, and hopefully IHO agrees on both names, EC and Sea of Japan.
Kim Han-ul, ARIRANG News, Washington.
In line with President Park Geun-hye's wish to change the country's extremely competitive education system, the Education Ministry has unveiled reform measures in its status report to the President. Our Presidential Office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details.
In an effort to reduce private tutoring and get students more focused on their schooling, the government will force universities to give a 0 mark on applications that include awards or certificates received outside of school. These will include TOEFL or other English language test scores, Math and Science Olympiad awards, and extracurricular education prizes received from private institutions. During the Education Ministry's status report on Thursday, President Park emphasized the need to keep the education system from pushing students to take upper grade courses in advance in an attempt to reduce mounting private tutoring expenses in the country. She ordered the ministry to reduce private tutoring expenses for English language education in particular, as it accounts for 1/3 of the money spent on private education.
학생들에게 과잉 영어 교육을 요구하는 교육 현실에 대한 근본적 개선 방안을 마련해야 한다고 봅니다.
The president also slammed the Culture and Sports Ministry, which gave a status report along with the Education Ministry on Thursday, and ordered them to look into what caused Korean short track speed skating star An Hyun-soo, who won a bronze medal at the Sochi Winter Olympics on Monday, to change his nationality.
안 선수의 문제가 파벌주의와 줄 세우기, 심판 부정 등 체육계 저변에 깔려 있는 부조리와 구조적 난맥상에 의한 것은 아닌지 되돌아봐야 하겠습니다.
An won 3 Olympic gold medals for Korea in 2006, but became a naturalized Russian citizen in 2011 after failing to qualify for the national team ahead of the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics. An's family claims that was due to fractional feuds in the sports sector. President Park called for a system in which athletes could be evaluated based solely on their performance and one in which the fairness of referees was guaranteed. She urged the ministry to come up with measures to root out corruption in the sports arena. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News.
For most Korean students, private tutoring is often not just an option, but a requirement to ensure they don't fall behind their classmates. It's this unquenchable thirst for the best grades and test scores that has made Korea, for better or for worse, one of the most competitive educational environments in the world. Shin Se-min has this report.
These students have dreams of gaining admission to prestigious universities and getting high-paid jobs later on, which means their school day doesn't end when the bell rings. Most of them then go to private academies called hagwons here in a country where the average high school student spends up to 16 hours of studying per day. Kim Kyou-hyun is a mother of 3 and wants the best for her children, like all mothers in the world.
By educating my children, I believe I'm helping them set a higher goal. This will eventually give them more options in life when they pursue a dream of their own.
To help them achieve those dreams, Kim sends her children all under the age of 10 to school or preschool in private education, which is a norm in Korea. The intense focus on education puts Korean students in the middle of a highly competitive environment that over time tends to turn them highly competitive. Korean students are often forced to double up on their educations, heading straight from their public school classrooms into the classrooms of private academies, where they sometimes stay even as late as midnight. And it's paying off in the classroom. Korea sends nearly 80% of its students to college, and Korean students fall at or near the top of international rankings in reading, math, and science. But at what cost? 75% of students in the nation attend at least one private academy, and the bills can quickly add up. In 2012, the private education sector was worth nearly $17 billion, causing reluctance in some couples to have children in the first place. And it's also taking a toll on the students themselves.
Big negative influence on the student overall development, emotional, cultural, interpersonal skill development, including creative thinking and communication skills and job preparation, self-esteem building, etc.
So while the Korean education system is the envy of some nations who view it as a benchmark for educational success, others, including President Park Geun-hye, see a system with flaws and are calling for change. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea's financial regulator has vowed to upgrade the data protection system as the country continues to reel from the largest ever personal information breach in its history. During a meeting at the National Assembly Thursday, Financial Services Commission Chair Shin Jae-yoon reiterated the importance of protecting client data and vowed to improve the nation's data security structure in order to regain the public trust. He also offered an apology for the leak. He confirmed the previously proposed 3-month suspension of business at the 3 card firms involved in the security breach will begin as early as this Friday. Local banks have been put on high alert as their net profit last year was slashed in half. The Financial Supervisory Service said on Thursday that the net profit of 18 domestic banks came in at 4 trillion won, or roughly $3.7 billion in 2013, which represents a more than 50% drop from the year before. The drop was particularly pronounced in the fourth quarter of last year, when a loss of $94 million was recorded. An official at the financial watchdog attributed the numbers to low interest rates and bad loans. Adding to the worries, the interest margin rate fell significantly to nearly 1.87%, the lowest, in fact, in 10 years. Now, in an indication Korea's housing market may be on the recovery track, housing transactions boomed last month. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said Thursday that the number of transactions came in to around 58,000 in January, a 117% increase from the same month last year. By region, the number of housing transactions in the Seoul metropolitan area soared the most, by more than 200%. The ministry attributed the surge to recent government policies, including a reduction in acquisition taxes and the lower taxation on owners of multiple houses. Korea has taken one step closer to inking a trade deal with its 7th largest trading partner, Australia. Seoul's Trade Ministry said Thursday that the two countries initialed a free trade agreement on Monday and agreed to formally sign it in the first half of this year. The trade pact is expected to boost exports of Korean products like cars and televisions, but there are concerns it could pose a threat to local farmers. Two-way trade between Korea and Australia totaled over $30 billion in 2013. If the parliamentary passage of the FTA goes smoothly, the deal is expected to take effect next year. The United States has slammed the release of 65 men from Afghanistan's Bagram detention center, saying the former prisoners pose a threat to security forces and civilians. U.S. forces say the move violates the terms of an agreement for the U.S. to hand over full control of the detention center to Afghanistan. An Afghan official said they've taken the decision according to their own law and that they did not have enough evidence to keep holding the detainees. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul said some of those released were responsible for the deaths of Afghan civilians and Afghan and coalition troops. All of the men released had been behind bars since the agreement was reached in September 2012. The winter storm that held the southeastern United States in its icy grip has now been pushed northeast, leaving hundreds of thousands of homes without power and families shivering in the cold. The snow and ice and sub-freezing temperatures have been particularly deadly on the roads, with at least 15 deaths reported over the past couple of days. And thousands of people also remain stranded at airports in the worst-hit areas. Flight tracking website flightaware.com says over 6,000 flights have been cancelled and nearly 2,500 delayed. Winter storm watches, warnings or advisories remain in effect for more than a dozen states, from Alabama to Maine. Forecasters say the wintry weather should ease off by Friday. Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta will resign on this Friday after his own party voted to replace him with its rising star and leader, Matteo Renzi. Letta decided to throw in the towel Thursday after the Democratic Party, the largest party in the national coalition, supported a call by Renzi for a more ambitious government to pull Italy out of its economic difficulties. Letta plans to tender his resignation to President Giorgio Napolitano on Friday. Napolitano is then expected to call on Renzi to form a new administration.
Well, after 6 days of competition in Sochi, Korea was able to win their second Olympic medal, but it didn't come easy as South Korean short track star Hwang Sung-hee earned a bronze medal in the women's 500-meter short track event. And despite having the lead in the beginning of the final, two skaters behind her falls and takes her down as well as she struggles to recover from the fall. But after the judges ruled that Lise Christie of Great Britain tripped her, Pak was given an advance and earned a bronze medal. While it's far from a gold medal, Hwang Sung-hee claims Korea's first medal in the 500-meter short track event in 16 years. However, she has pulled out of the 1500-meter event after sustaining an injury in her bronze medal finish. And moving over to figure skating, where the defending champion Kim Kyou-hyun, after arriving in Sochi, had her open practice session along with the other Korean figure skaters Kim Hae-jin and Park So-yeon. While her rivals in the sport, Mao Asada and Yulia Lipnitskaya, are practicing in nearby countries to keep their practices as closed as possible, the figure queen Kim Kyou-hyun held her open practice session at the Olympic Park. And after holding her practice session, Kim Kyou-hyun stated that she did not like the ice and will have to get used to the ice conditions. Meanwhile, the Vancouver gold medalist will be looking to defend her title next week. And shifting over to the women's 1,000-meter speed skating event, where after claiming her second straight Olympic gold in the 500-meter event, Lee Sang-hwa enjoyed the 1,000-meter event and finished her Olympic competitions. With no pressure on her to win another medal in this event, Lee Sang-hwa stated that she enjoyed competing in the 1,000-meter event as she finished with a final time of 1 minute 15.94 seconds, good for 12th overall. Now, the 12th place finish is still a huge improvement from her Vancouver record when she finished in 23rd overall. And now over to curling, where the Korean women's curling team continues to wow everyone as they keep their semifinal hopes alive after beating Russia. In a must-win situation after losing to Switzerland and Sweden, the Korean women's curling team kept their composure throughout their match against Russia as they easily beat the 8th-ranked Russian side. And with their record now at 2-2, they will need to win their next 4 matches in order to keep their hopes alive as they're set to face off against the 5th-ranked China later today. And now finishing things off, let's take a look at the medal count after 6 days of competition in Sochi. Of course, taking a look here, what do you know? Germany with the most gold medals so far with 7, including 2 silvers and a bronze. Canada, Norway, the Netherlands, and the U.S. all with 4 gold medals each to complete the top 5, with Korea down in 13th place with 1 gold and 1 bronze so far. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all for now. Thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll be back at noon Korea time, but in the meantime, you can always catch up with what's been happening on our website, arirang.co.kr/news.